I was 71, gripping the edge of my own marble counter as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. The kitchen lights hummed softly above me, but all I could hear was her voice. Monica stood there, my son's new wife, her eyes fixed on mine with a smirk sharp enough to cut skin. "Oh, we got married last night," she said, each word rolling off her tongue like a challenge. "It was for VIPs only." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. My hearing isn't what it used to be, but the curl of her lips told me she wanted me to catch every syllable. Ethan stood at her side, shifting uncomfortably, his hands jammed deep in his pockets. My son couldn't even look at me. When she added, "The real family," something cracked inside my chest. I had carried them for years, $1,800 a month in rent, 3 full years. 36 checks, $64,800. I'd bought groceries, gifts, even the lavender gown she picked from a boutique, $1,200 on my card. In total, nearly $77,500. My love tallied up on paper, reduced to arithmetic. Yet here I was, finding out I wasn't part of their family at all. Not a mother, not even a guest, just a bottomless machine to be drained until empty. And then, only days later, the phone rang. Monica's tone was casual, almost bored. "Did you send the keys to the villa yet?" My villa, the home Harold and I built, worth $5 million, where every window still carries his memory. That was the moment something shifted. If it were you, would you surrender your sanctuary? Or would you finally stand your ground? Stay with me. Roots and Secrets is where I tell how I chose fire over silence. The morning after Monica's phone call, the villa felt colder, as if her voice still echoed through the hallways. I sat at the dining table with a yellow legal pad in front of me, the same table where Harold and I had hosted Sunday dinners, where Ethan once spilled orange juice at 13 and cried because he thought he had ruined the wood. That table had absorbed years of laughter, mistakes, and second chances. Now it was covered with receipts, statements, and numbers, proof of something I had refused to name until now. My hand shook as I wrote the first line, 36 months of rent at $1,800 each, $64,800. The pen scratched across the page, leaving the number like a scar. Then groceries, $7,200. I remembered each bag I had carried up their stairs, each delivery I had arranged so they wouldn't feel hungry. Gifts, $3,500. Flat screens, restaurant bills, small luxuries they had chosen while I told myself I was helping them build a life. Car repair, $2,000. The transmission that died in the middle of winter. I totaled it, $77,500. My heart thudded with each digit. It was love written in receipts, motherhood reduced to arithmetic. Across the room, by the closet, the lavender dress still hung, sequins catching the morning light. Beside it, a shoebox with silver heels sat unopened. They had been meant for her walk down the aisle, a moment I was never invited to witness. That dress mocked me now, shimmering faintly as if it knew I had bought it with blind hope. I whispered into the empty room, "I am nothing but a vending machine." The words clung to me like iron chains. For years I told myself Ethan just needed time, that one day he would stand on his own. But every check had only made him lean harder. And Monica, with her sharp smile, had not lifted him. She had sharpened his appetite. My chest burned with a mix of sorrow and fury. I thought of Harold, his voice steady in memory. Love without respect is just charity. He had been gone for years, but his wisdom still lived in the walls of this villa. I had turned charity into survival, convincing myself it was love. But it wasn't. It was surrender. The phone sat on the table beside the receipts. I picked it up, dialed Ethan's number, and waited through 3 rings. When he answered, his tone was soft, rehearsed. "Mom, I want to be clear," I said. "That villa is mine. It stays mine." There was a pause. Then his voice slipped into something slicker. "We just thought you'd want to help us, Mom. You always have. Isn't that what family does?" My jaw tightened. Family doesn't exclude their mother from a wedding and then demand her house. His sigh was heavy. "You're making this harder than it has to be." I nearly laughed. "I've already made it easy for you. $77,500 easy. The machine is broken now. I am not paying anymore." The silence that followed was thick. Then the line clicked dead. He had hung up. My hand stayed pressed against the receiver long after the call ended, the plastic warm under my skin. I set the phone down and drew another line under the total on my pad. That number wasn't just money. It was my silence, my patience, my willingness to let them take and take. No more. The villa seemed to hum around me, the ocean breeze slipping through the curtains like encouragement. The house was on my side. It whispered, "Stand your ground." That evening, I walked through each room as if reclaiming territory. The foyer where Harold once kissed me before work. The balcony where Ethan had once leaned against the rail at 17, asking about girls. The garden where I had planted roses and Harold had laughed at my stubbornness over fertilizer. All of it was mine, built with love, maintained with grief, and not for sale. I touched the lavender dress as I passed it, my fingers brushing the sequins. Once I believed buying that dress would buy me inclusion, dignity. Instead, I had purchased my own humiliation. I shut the closet door with a quiet finality. That chapter was closed. Later, I paced the dining room, my reflection in the glass cabinet catching me off guard. I looked older, yes, skin-lined, hair silver. But there was something else there too, a sharpness. My eyes no longer pleaded. They narrowed, calculating, resolved. For the first time in years, I didn't see a widow keeping peace. I saw a woman drawing a line. I remembered the last promise I had made Ethan, $5,000 for his wedding, even though he hadn't told me when it would be. Even though the guest list didn't include me, I had said yes, still hoping for a seat at the table. That money was gone too, added to the $77,500. I shook my head, almost in disbelief at my own blindness. They had taken the gift and shut me out. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. The bitterness thickened on my tongue, metallic and hot. Enough. I picked up the phone again, but not to call Ethan. Instead, I dialed the bank. The next morning, I dressed in a navy cardigan and slacks Harold once said made me look put together. Sometimes strength begins with how you button your collar. I drove to the bank where I had been a customer for 3 decades. The air inside smelled of paper and polished wood, comforting and cool. I walked straight to Mr. Lutz's office, the branch manager who had known us since the early days. "Vivian," he said warmly, "what brings you here?" I smoothed my cardigan and sat down. "I need to cancel every automatic transfer I've set up for Ethan and Monica." His brows lifted, but he didn't interrupt. He folded his hands and listened. I explained, 36 months of rent, groceries, car repairs, gifts, $77,500 in total. I told him about Monica demanding the keys to the villa, about the wedding I wasn't invited to. My voice stayed steady, but my hands trembled. Mr. Lutz's eyes darkened. "Vivian, that sounds like elder financial abuse." I swallowed hard, but nodded. "I know, that's why I'm here. The machine is broken. I'm not handing out another dollar." He leaned back, pressing his lips together. "I'll help you cut every transfer, But you should know, when children get used to this kind of support, they rarely let go quietly. A bitter smile touched my mouth. I don't expect quiet. I expect a fight, but I need to take the first step. Together, we reviewed the accounts. He printed pages of transactions, each line a record of my exhaustion. 36 checks in neat rows, bleeding money into Ethan's life. My stomach twisted, but I signed each cancellation form. With each stroke of my pen, my spine straightened. By the time I signed the last, my hand shook, not from weakness, but from relief. When Mr. Lutz looked at me, there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Respect. "Vivian," he said softly, "this is the first time you've come here for yourself. Not for Ethan, not for Monica. Just you." Tears pricked at my eyes. It feels like I'm finally awake. Outside, the Florida sun was fierce, the air thick with salt. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs without guilt pressing on my chest. For the first time in years, I felt my own breath belong to me. That evening, as I set a single plate on the dining table, headlights swept across the driveway. A knock rattled the door. Ethan stood there, Monica behind him, and beside them, a man in a crisp suit. His smile was polite, predatory. "Mrs. Clark," he said smoothly, "I represent your son and daughter-in-law. They've asked me to review your financial documents. It's just a simple matter." The audacity stole my breath. I hadn't even finished reclaiming my life before they came knocking again. Behind the man's polished tone, I heard the threat. They weren't finished draining me. They were just getting started. I stood tall in the doorway. "My documents are private. You have no right to them." His smile sharpened. "Sometimes families don't understand when it's time to step aside." The night closed around us, thick and electric. I could feel Harold's steady hand in memory on my shoulder. I met their eyes, my son's ashamed, Monica's hard, the lawyer's cold, and whispered to myself, "The machine is broken, and I will not bend." The next morning, I woke with the taste of metal on my tongue. Sleep had been shallow, broken by fragments of Monica's voice and the lawyer's polished threat. The villa, usually quiet, felt charged, like the air before a storm. I made coffee and carried the mug to the balcony. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, steady and indifferent, whispering that life could go on without me. Or perhaps, finally, with me. I replayed the scene at the door. Ethan shifting, Monica smirking, the lawyer introducing himself as if my life were a contract waiting for his pen. They thought they had cornered me. They thought age meant weakness. They had forgotten I had built this life brick by brick, alongside Harold, who once told me, "The day you stop setting terms is the day you stop living." His voice returned to me now, faint but firm. So when tires crunched on the gravel 2 days later, I was ready. Ethan's car pulled up, Monica in the passenger seat, sunglasses perched high like armor. They didn't knock. They walked straight to the door as though they owned it. I opened it before they could press the bell. "What are you doing here?" My voice was calm, flat, like polished stone. Ethan attempted a smile. "We thought we'd get a head start, Mom. Move some things." Monica brushed past him, her perfume heavy, sweet, and cloying. She glanced at the chandeliers, the marble, the family photos. "Spacious," she murmured. "Perfect for entertaining." She turned to me with that same curl of lip. "Keys, please." The word echoed in my ears, the same word that had hollowed me out days ago. But this time, it struck flint against steel. "This is my home," I said. "Not for long," Monica replied, folding her arms. "Ethan is your son. This villa is his inheritance. Why delay the inevitable? Inheritance comes after death," I answered coldly. "Last I checked, I am still alive." The silence thickened. A rope pulled tight. Ethan's eyes darted between us, his hands raised slightly as if to mediate.
Mom, let's not.
Not today, I cut in. You both meant every word. Family only. Real family. And now you walk in here as though I'm already gone. I steadied myself, feeling Harold's presence in the firmness of my spine. If you want the keys, you'll meet my condition. Monica tilted her head, curious but mocking. Condition? You pay 6 months of your own rent up front, from your own pockets, and you both sign a no-claim agreement stating you have no legal or financial rights to this villa or to the Clark Living Trust. Only then will I hand over a key. The air shifted. Monica's sunglasses slipped slightly down her nose, revealing eyes sharp with fury. Ethan's shoulders stiffened, fists curling at his sides. That's ridiculous, Monica snapped. You can't put conditions on your own family. I just did. Ethan's voice cracked.
Mom, why are you being so cruel?
Cruel? My laugh was short, bitter. Cruel is cutting your mother out of your wedding and then demanding the keys to her home. Cruel is draining $77,500 and calling it love. I have been generous. I have been patient, but I am not your vending machine. For the first time, Ethan's face shifted, shame flickering in his eyes. But Monica doubled down. You'll regret this, she hissed. When you're old and alone, you'll wish you had been kinder. I stepped closer, steady as stone. I'd rather be alone than be used. The silence afterward was heavy enough to choke on. Finally, Monica turned sharply, her heels clicking against the marble as she stormed out. Ethan lingered a moment, his lips parting as though he might apologize, but no words came. He followed her. I closed the door and leaned against it, my breath ragged but proud. For the first time in decades, I hadn't reached for my checkbook. I had drawn a line. Yet even as relief filled me, I knew Monica's threat was real. She wasn't the kind to back down quietly. The storm would return. I walked the halls that night, checking locks, feeling the villa breathe with me, each door bolt sliding into place like punctuation marks on a new chapter. The machine is broken, I whispered into the empty rooms, but another voice inside me added, prepare. The next morning, I dressed carefully, fastening each button of my navy cardigan. I drove to the bank again, this time not to cancel transfers, but to gather proof. Mr. Lutz welcomed me with the same steady calm.
Vivian, he said, I was expecting you.
I need copies of every payment I made to Ethan and Monica. Rent transfers, grocery transactions, everything. I need a record. He nodded, sliding files from a drawer. Pages spilled onto the desk. Neat rows of withdrawals, each line another reminder. He highlighted totals, stapled receipts.
36 payments of rent, he murmured. Groceries, gifts, car repair,
$77,500. I touched the stack of papers, the evidence heavy in my hands. For years, I had thought love was invisible, a current flowing unseen. Now, love was ink on paper, undeniable. And now it was proof of exploitation.
Vivian,
he said gently,
you're doing the right thing. But be prepared. Children who grow dependent don't let go without a fight.
I know, I replied. I don't expect peace. I expect war. That evening, I joined the garden club for the first time in years. The clubhouse smelled of soil and coffee, the chatter of women floating through the room. I stood near the doorway, clutching my handbag like a shield. Then a woman with silver-streaked hair approached me. Her eyes were sharp but kind.
You must be new. Not new, I said quietly. Just returning.
She extended her hand.
Eleanor Harris, 30 years in this neighborhood.
I hesitated before taking it.
Vivian Clark, down by the coast.
Recognition flickered in her eyes. The villa with the rose garden. Harold was always out front trimming hedges. My throat tightened, but I nodded. She tilted her head, studying me. You seem like you're carrying something heavy.
The words slipped out before I could stop them. They shut me out, my son and his wife. They got married without me, said it was family only. Now they want the keys to my villa.
Her eyes sharpened, but with understanding, not judgment. She pulled out a chair. You're not alone. My daughter once tried the same. When I cut her off, she called me heartless. But 6 months later, she learned to stand. It hurt, but it saved us both.
6 months? I whispered. She nodded. 6 months of saying no. 6 months of watching her stumble. But then she rose. If I had kept feeding her, she never would have found her legs. Tears blurred my vision. Ethan doesn't see me as his mother anymore. Just a bank account.
Eleanor's hand covered mine, warm and firm. Then close the bank. Hate is better than dependence. Dependence kills you both. Her words settled over me like sunlight. The chatter of the room faded. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders loosened. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't crazy. Other mothers had stood where I stood, and they had survived. As I drove home, the Florida sky burned pink and gold. Eleanor's words echoed, planting boundaries. Like roses, boundaries needed thorns. That night, I stood in my rose garden, brushing my fingers over a bloom, its petals soft, its thorns sharp. I realized that was me now, still capable of beauty, still capable of love, but no longer defenseless. Days later, another envelope arrived at my doorstep. The return address was a law firm. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside, a letter accused me of being incapable of managing my finances. Ethan and Monica were petitioning the court for guardianship. My knees buckled. Guardianship. They wanted to strip me of control over my villa, my accounts, my life. They wanted to declare me a child again in the eyes of the law. I pressed the letter flat against the table, my breath shallow. The numbers, the receipts, the lavender dress, they weren't just relics anymore. They were weapons, and I would need every one of them. I looked out at the ocean, steady and endless. My lips formed the words, steady as prayer. Didn't I mention the condition? The envelope sat on my dining table like a weight I couldn't lift. Guardianship. A word that cut sharper than Monica's smirk or Ethan's silence. It meant they wanted to declare me unfit, seize my villa, my bank accounts, my choices. Not just the property Harold and I built, but my life itself. I traced the letters on the page with my fingertip, my chest tight. For decades, I had given until there was nothing left. Now they were trying to strip me of the last thing that was mine, my dignity. That evening, headlights swept across the driveway. A knock shook the doorframe. When I opened it, Ethan stood there with Monica at his side and Carol, their lawyer, sharp in his suit. But another figure stepped forward, a woman in a gray blazer with a badge. "Mrs. Clark," she said, voice clipped. "I'm Ms. Schultz. I've been assigned to investigate claims of elder incapacity." Her presence chilled me more than Carol's slick tone. The state was now in my living room. She looked around, clipboard in hand, noting the bills on the table, the photos on the wall, the lavender dress still hanging near the closet. "I need to be sure you're safe and able to manage your affairs," she said. My hands trembled slightly as I poured tea. "You'll find I'm capable. The only danger here is how much money I've given away." Behind her, Monica's voice was smooth as silk. "It's too much house for her. She forgets things. We just want to protect her." I clenched my jaw. "This villa is mine, and I am managing it just fine." When Ms. Schultz left, promising to file her report, dread pressed on my chest.
They had escalated this beyond family cruelty. It was a legal assault now. That night, I sat on the balcony, Harold's photo in my lap. "They want to call me incompetent," I whispered into the ocean breeze, "but I see clearer now than ever." 2 days later, another knock. Ms. Schultz again, this time with Ethan, Monica, and Carol behind her. Their smiles were tight, rehearsed. They entered my home like actors ready for their cue. Monica scanned the foyer, her gaze lingering on the family portraits. "Such a beautiful villa," she said sweetly, but far too much for Vivian to handle alone. "She misplaces papers. She forgets." My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. "If I may, I'd like to introduce someone." The door opened again. Mr. Weber stepped inside, briefcase in hand. His presence shifted the air, calm, commanding. He shook Ms. Schultz's hand firmly. "I'm Donovan Weber, legal counsel for Mrs. Clark. I have documentation to clarify matters." He laid papers across the coffee table, highlighted bank transfers, cancellation forms, notes from the bank. Over 3 years, Mrs. Clark gave $77,500 to her son and daughter-in-law. Rent, groceries, gifts, repairs. These are not signs of confusion. They are records of generosity. And she stopped those payments herself. Replaced locks, installed cameras. That is not incapacity. That is clarity. Miss Schultz scanned the records, brows knitting. Carol tried to object, but Weber's voice cut him clean. "What your clients want is not protection. It's control of a $5 million villa." The room stilled. Monica flushed crimson. Ethan's eyes dropped to the floor. Miss Schultz closed her folder. "I'll file my report," she said evenly. "From what I've seen, Mrs. Clark is capable of managing her own affairs." Relief rushed through me so fast my knees nearly buckled. But Weber's hand on my shoulder was steady, serious. "They'll take this to court. Be ready." That night, the villa felt hollow. I sat in the living room, Harold's photo in my lap, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. In daylight, I was strong. But alone, I broke. Tears ran hot down my cheeks. "Our own son," I whispered. "He sees me as a wallet, not a mother." I thought of Ethan as a boy, scraped knees, sandy hair, laughter that once filled this house. Where had that boy gone? The grief ached so deeply I thought it might stop my breath. Then the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but when I did, it was Eleanor. Her voice was warm, steady. "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about you." My voice cracked. "They're taking me to court, Eleanor. My own son. How do you survive that kind of betrayal?" "You cry," she said simply. "You scream, and then you stand back up. Because surrender is what they want most. Don't give it to them." Her words were like a lantern in the dark. I pressed the receiver to my chest after she hung up, holding on to that glow. The next morning, the garden club came to the villa with flowers and casseroles. They filled the kitchen with chatter, their presence like a shield around me. "You're not alone," one woman said firmly. "We'll stand with you if they drag you to court." Their kindness steadied me, but the ache inside lingered. Later that day, I drove to the cemetery. Gravel crunched underfoot as I walked to Harold's grave. Kneeling on damp earth, I traced his name in granite. "They want to say I'm incompetent," I whispered. "To take the villa you built. Can you believe it, Harold? Our own son." Sobs tore through me. "You were always the strong one. I gave, and now they're using that against me." The cemetery was quiet except for the breeze in the trees. A bird landed on a branch, chirping as if to remind me I was still alive. "I thought love was enough," I said. "But love turned me into a machine. And when I finally stop, they call me cruel." Tears soaked my hands, but even through grief, a spark flickered. I pressed my palm to the stone. "They want me powerless. But Harold, I hear you.
You'd tell me to stand, to fight. By the time I rose, my face was wet, but my spine straighter. Night had nearly swallowed me, but I clawed back to the surface. The following evening, twilight painted the sky violet and gold. I returned with a single white rose, knelt again at Harold's grave. They think they can erase me with a signature, I whispered. But the machine is broken, and I am free. The words came louder, carried by the wind. I will not let them take our home. I will not let them reduce me to a number. I am Vivian Clark. I am not a bank account. I am not a burden. I am a woman who built her life with her own hands, and I am not finished. The breeze lifted my hair, and I imagined Harold's hand on my shoulder. When I stood, it was with steadier breath. This wasn't goodbye. It was a promise. When I pulled into the driveway, the villa glowed faintly under the porch lights. Mr. Weber was waiting with a folder tucked beneath his arm. Dr. Moore has agreed to evaluate you, he said. He's respected, thorough, and unafraid to contradict their so-called experts. His report could change everything. I took the folder, its weight solid in my hands. Then let's do it. I want them to see how strong I really am. That night, I double-checked the locks, glanced at the red blink of the security cameras, and whispered into the stillness. Tomorrow, the real fight begins. And I am ready. The morning of Dr. Moore's evaluation, I woke before dawn. My palms were damp, though the air was cool. The villa was quiet, except for the sigh of the ocean through the open windows. I dressed carefully. A navy dress suit Harold had once said made me look like I could command a room. Today, I needed every ounce of that strength. Dr. Moore's office was modest, lined with shelves of books and certificates. His voice was calm, steady. We'll go through a few tests, Mrs. Clark. Nothing invasive. Just memory, reasoning, recall. For nearly 2 hours, he asked me to remember sequences of words, solve problems, recount details from a short story. He asked about my routines, my finances, my late husband. I answered each question clearly. My mind felt sharp, sharper than it had in years, because I knew what was at stake. When he finished, he set down his pen. Your results aren't just good, he said, meeting my eyes. They're excellent. You scored above average for your age in memory, comprehension, reasoning. There is no sign of diminished capacity. Relief hit me like a tide. For weeks I had feared their whispers, their accusations. A part of me worried they were right, that I was slipping. But here it was, in ink, from a respected professional. I was sound, strong. That evening, I handed the report to Mr. Weber at the villa. He accepted it like a weapon he had been waiting for. This, he said, is our shield. Now we gather our swords. The swords came in the form of witnesses. Members of the garden club signed affidavits describing me as clear-headed, organized, active in the community. Eleanor's testimony was crisp and unwavering. Vivian has more clarity and energy than women 10 years younger. Anyone who doubts her should spend an afternoon at the garden club. Then came a surprise. Mr. Green, the pharmacist, appeared at my door with a letter. His face was flushed, his hands unsteady. I need to set the record straight, he said. I never meant for my words to be twisted. You weren't confused, you were cautious. You asked me to double-check a prescription after a brand change. Monica pressured me to sign a statement, but I can't live with that lie. He handed me the letter, retracting his earlier testimony. My hands shook as I accepted it. Thank you, I whispered. You don't know how much this means. I do, he replied. People like her ruin reputations. I won't let mine be one of them. Weber read the letter and nodded. Another pillar gone from their case. Davis is gossip. Lehman is a hired pen. And now Green has turned back to the truth. Then Weber produced a document from his briefcase. The no-claim agreement I had drafted weeks earlier. My breath caught.
"This proves foresight," he said. "It shows you weren't confused or incapable. You were setting terms, boundaries, and it ties directly to your words. Didn't I mention the condition?" The phrase struck me again, sharp as the day I'd spoken it. For the first time since this began, I felt the ground under me solidify. The day of the hearing arrived gray and heavy, the courthouse looming like a fortress. My knees ached as I climbed the steps, but my spine stayed straight. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Neighbors, acquaintances, even members of the garden club had come. Their whispers filled the air until the bailiff called for order. I sat at the defense table beside Mr. Weber. Across from me, Ethan and Monica sat with Carol. Monica's lips curved in that familiar smirk, Ethan unable to meet my eyes. The judge entered, Alvarez, stern and commanding. "This court is now in session. Petitioners proceed." Carol stood first, smooth as glass. "Your Honor, today we present the case of Mrs. Vivian Clark, who sadly can no longer manage her financial or personal affairs. Our clients, her devoted son and daughter-in-law, only wish to ensure her safety and the proper handling of her estate." Devoted. The word tasted like poison. He gestured toward me. "She is 71, widowed, isolated. She has displayed concerning behaviors, mismanaging funds, showing confusion. Guardianship will protect her from herself." Then he called witnesses. Mr. Davis shuffled to the stand, voice quivering. "I've lived next to Mrs. Clark for years. I've seen her arguing in the driveway, strangers visiting at odd hours. She isn't the same woman she used to be." Strangers. Those strangers had been the garden club dropping off casseroles, the security team installing cameras. His words stung, but they were twisted shadows of truth. Next came Carol's use of Mr. Green's old statement, read aloud as though gospel. "Mrs. Clark demonstrated confusion about prescriptions," Carol intoned. Finally, Dr. Lehman, tall and polished, spectacles gleaming, testified. "Based on reports, Mrs. Clark shows early signs of diminished capacity. Her judgment is impaired. Guardianship would provide stability." Monica dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low, heavy with false concern. "My mother forgets things. She loses track of money. She doesn't know what's best for herself. We just want to help her." Hearing him say those words was worse than any lawyer's lie. To hear my son, the boy I once rocked to sleep, declare me unfit. It was like being buried alive. The courtroom turned its eyes to me, waiting for me to break. My chest tightened. For a heartbeat, I wanted to run, to give in, to let them take everything. But then, I caught sight of Eleanor in the gallery. Her chin was high, her eyes burning with faith in me. Behind her, the garden club women nodded silently. At my side, Weber leaned close and whispered, "Hold steady. Their stage is almost over. Then we take the floor." Judge Alvarez raised a hand. "The court has heard the petitioner's opening and witnesses. We will now proceed to cross-examination. Defense?" Carol returned to his seat, Monica clutching his arm like she'd already won. Ethan's eyes flicked to me briefly, shame shadowing his face. My breath steadied as Weber rose, buttoning his jacket with deliberate precision. His presence was calm but edged with steel. "Your Honor," he began, "what we have just heard is a story stitched from gossip, exaggerations, and hired voices. But stories crumble against facts, and facts are what we bring." I straightened in my chair. My heart still pounded, but it wasn't just fear anymore. It was fire. Weber's voice carried through the courtroom like a blade slicing fog. He turned first to Mr. Davis. "Sir, you testified you saw Mrs. Clark arguing in her driveway. Were those arguments about her confusion or about money she had already given?" Davis shifted, his face reddening. "Money, mostly. So, not confusion," Weber pressed. "Disagreements over her saying no after years of paying your neighbor's bills." Davis muttered an embarrassed assent. "Next, Weber faced Mr. Green. You once signed a statement claiming Mrs. Clark was confused with prescriptions. Do you stand by it? Green's voice trembled, but his words were steady. No, she was careful. She double-checked a dosage after a brand change. Monica pressured me to sign. I regret it. A ripple went through the gallery. Monica's face darkened, her jaw clenched. Finally, Weber stepped toward Dr. Lehman. Doctor, have you ever personally examined Mrs. Clark? Lehman adjusted his spectacles. No, but based on reports. Hearsay, Weber cut him off. You've never spoken to her, tested her, or looked her in the eye, correct? Lehman faltered. Correct. The courtroom buzzed. Weber let the silence sharpen, then produced Dr. Moore's report. Unlike Dr. Lehman, Dr. Moore actually examined Mrs. Clark. His evaluation shows her above average for memory, reasoning, and judgment. That is evidence, Your Honor. Judge Alvarez reviewed the report, his brow lifting slightly. Weber wasn't finished. He placed another document on the evidence table, the no-claim agreement. Weeks before this petition, Mrs. Clark drafted this. It required her son and daughter-in-law to pay 6 months' rent from their own pockets and waive all rights to her estate if they wanted access to her villa. That's not incapacity. That's foresight. Those were her very words. Didn't I mention the condition? Every head turned toward Monica. Her face drained, then flushed again with rage. Ethan sat rigid, eyes fixed on the floor. Weber looked at me. Mrs. Clark, would you like to address the court? My knees trembled, but I rose. I leaned on my cane, my voice steady. For years, I believed love meant giving. I gave 36 months of rent, groceries, gifts, repairs, $77,500. I thought if I kept giving, my son would see me. But I was wrong. I wasn't a mother. I was their bottomless vending machine. When they cut me out of their wedding, I stayed silent. But when they demanded the keys to my villa, I finally said no. Not without respect. And because I said no, they dragged me here to declare me unfit. Look at me. I am not broken. I am not weak. I am free. The courtroom fell into a silence so thick I could hear my own breath. Judge Alvarez set the papers down. His tone was firm. The petitioner's evidence is insufficient and unreliable. The defense has provided credible documentation and professional evaluation. The petition for guardianship is denied. The gavel struck once, loud as thunder. Relief flooded me. I had won. Across the aisle, Monica's mask shattered into fury. Ethan's head hung low, shame carved into his posture, but I didn't linger on them. I turned to Eleanor in the gallery, to the women of the garden club, to Mr. Weber and Dr. Moore, to every face that had believed in me. The machine is broken, I whispered. Applause rippled softly through the room, restrained but real. Eleanor's eyes glistened. Weber squeezed my arm. You did it, Vivian. You stood your ground. The next week, I signed papers selling the villa. $5 million, the exact figure they had tried to snatch. People gasped at my choice, but I felt lighter handing over the keys. They had wanted them so desperately, but now they meant nothing. I moved into a smaller condominium by the sea. Quiet, sunlit, wholly mine. No footsteps echoing but my own. No shadows of entitlement at the door. Only freedom. The first thing I did was set aside $1 million for an organization fighting elder financial abuse. If others were trapped as I had been, they would know they weren't alone. The rest I divided carefully. Enough to live, enough to travel, enough to breathe. Eleanor visited with flowers. My sister Diana came with laughter. Family, I realized, wasn't always blood. It was truth. It was those who stood beside you instead of draining you. One evening, I sat on my new balcony with Harold's photo on my lap. The sun melted into the horizon, painting the waves gold. We did it, I whispered. They wanted to erase me, but I stood. I'm not their machine anymore. I'm free.
And to those listening now, Roots and Secrets is where stories like mine live. If you've ever been used, dismissed, or told you were nothing, share your story. Subscribe, comment, let others know they're not alone. Because dignity isn't charity. It's the fire we protect.